Good evening, Mark. What kind of subjects are we covering tonight?
Well, the first subject we're going to talk about is we've got U.S. District Judge Andrew Hanen, and he came up against the Obama administration on an executive order.
Are we talking about in Texas? And we're also talking about what is known as the delayed, let's see, the exact wording on this is?
Is DAPA or
The
DACA?
DAPA and DACA.
DAPA and DACA.
Yeah, those are the two identifiers for these laws, which effectively says the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival Act, DACA, and the other one is the Deferred Action for Parents Americans Act, which effectively says people do not get deported. And so Judge Hanen actually made a unique ruling, and why don't you tell me about that ruling?
Well, let's back up a little bit. Okay, what you have is what they call undocumented aliens, or people who come across the border without inspection. So if you come through the border and you get your passport stamped or you get your green card stamped, that's called passing with inspection, right? If you come across the border not going through inspection, that means you snuck across the border, okay? And so what we've got is, you know, apparently 5 million, maybe 10, maybe 50 million people coming over here, and they're here, and they snuck across the border. They weren't inspected. They don't have any papers. And what Obama wants to do is, it's kind of like the good old Chicago days. He's going to say, look, you get an income tax credit, earned in, what are the tax?
Yeah, under the IRS, it's the earned income tax credit, so you actually get a rebate.
Yeah, 10 or 20,000.
Even though you've never paid taxes.
So for, you get 10, 20,000 a year for 3 years. So that's 60K, whatever it is, for 30, 60K.
Isn't that pretty good? Do we get that?
No, you don't.
Oh,
and
okay.
then you get welfare benefits, health, Title VIII. So you're pretty good to come over and you get like a cash settlement. And the idea is that they want to have people who are can't really support themselves and they're reliant on the central government, and they'd be reliable voters.
Well, you're talking about the old Chicago style.
Exactly, right.
And when we're here tonight, we have to think about
old
buying
Chicago,
votes. The
yeah.
old Chicago, the Daily Machine, and
Yeah.
buying votes.
And yeah, so you want to vote early and vote often. And what's the beautiful thing about buying votes? You don't buy them with your own money.
Oh, of course not.
You buy them with other people's money, by the taxpayers' money.
OPM.
And so what happens here? Let's say for one of these voters that you're going to buy, it's about maybe $1 million a lifetime in benefits. And so you would say $1 million a vote, that's not much, but that's not what's happening. The genius, I think, it's $1 million per voter.
And it's not just the one vote they're buying. They're buying every vote for the rest of that person's life, every vote for their kid's life. And that could go on generational because we were allowed to come here under the great and powerful Democratic Party. Is that what we're talking about?
No, but you've got to look at it mathematically. Okay?
Oh, mathematically.
If you look at Acorn.
Is there a formula?
Yeah, there is a formula. Like when you look at, how Obama made his way up through Acorn and that kind of thing. Now, those people aren't voting once per election. They're being bussed around. They're buying 4, 5, 6 times an election. So if you're buying a voter, you're not buying 1 vote for election. You're buying 4, 5, 6 votes for election. So when you start looking at a lifetime of votes, might be thousands of votes. So really, when you buy a voter for $1 million of taxpayer money, maybe it's only $10,000 a vote. So it's a pretty good deal.
Well, actually, it is a good deal. But let's go back to what Judge Hanen said, because what's remarkable about this is this judge actually put a stop to DAPA. Right. By saying that I'm going to suspend the law until this has gone through its proper legal channels.
But it didn't stop.
But funny enough, even though he stopped the law,
right.
The Department of Justice attorney, something Hartnett, Miss Hartnett, told him, oh, it's all going to stop the moment you say this. But funny enough, he found out that it didn't stop. In fact, DAPA kept going and gave these people the rights not to be deported.
Well, I beg to disagree here. First of all, he didn't stop a law, okay?
He put a hold on it.
There was a Congress, there was a law going through that would have done DAPA or DACA. That went through Congress. It failed. It didn't pass. Okay, so the president said, well, look, what I'm going to do is basically break the law. I'm not going to enforce the law, and I'm going to break the law. So basically, I would say what Judge Hanen did, he stopped an illegal act by the president.
Oh, you're talking about an executive order, the phone and the pen.
Yeah, well, but see, there's a law that says the executive shall do this, and he stopped that. So basically, I would say that's a conspiracy to conduct a criminal enterprise. So what I would say Judge Hanen stopped was a conspiracy to conduct a criminal enterprise. I don't think he stopped the law.
But what's interesting about this
He stopped
is
the law from being broken.
What's interesting about
Thousands
this,
and millions of
what
times,
is
yeah.
very interesting about this, a decision came down the same day
Right.
he made this ruling about DAPA in a case involving DACA. And
Right.
in DACA, the state of Mississippi sued the government,
Right.
saying that it was going to be, it's too discretionary to have a district attorney to make decisions about whether somebody should be deported or not, and there's no way the financial burden should be suffered by the state effectively. But what's interesting is the law in Crane versus Johnson came down on behalf of the administration, basically, but left open the same arguments that are made by Judge Hanen in the DAPA law to be reinterpreted by the same circuit, the Fifth Circuit.
Okay, well, let's look what the DOJ, Department of Justice, argued that they have a right to do prosecutorial discretion. In other words, they don't have time to prosecute every crime. If they've got 20 murders they got to prosecute, they don't have time for kidnappings, and they don't have time for burglaries. They don't have time for jaywalking because they have these 20 murders, and they're going to do the murders first. That's called prosecutorial discretion, and that is perfectly acceptable, and it happens all the time. But that's on a case-by-case basis. What's happening with the DACA is that you're saying, and whether it's whoever it is or whatever law does it, this is a huge constitutional case, because what it does is it has a president who's involved in a RICO, which is basically a racketeering enterprise, who's saying it's an executive order, whatever it is, but he's basically breaking a law. So it doesn't really matter whether it's got anything to do with immigration or the price of tea in China. Basically, here's a law. It's like saying, okay, let's say you're the president, and you say, well, I'm not going to prosecute murderers anymore. People can murder as much as they want.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that's interesting there.
Yeah.
The DAPA law doesn't apply on a case-by-case basis. It applies to a whole.
That's what I'm saying. It's like saying we're not going to go after murder.
Everybody falls into this.
No, but I mean, it's like saying we're not going to prosecute murders
anybody,
anymore.
yeah. Although murders are freebie now.
Or anybody who does kidnapping, it's okay. You
so
can do
no
kidnapping.
more deportations.
Well,
and that's what Judge Hanen
but the point is,
it
doesn't really matter if it's deportations or if immigrations or if it's murders or kidnappings. Here you have an executive. It's like a cop saying, well, I'm not going to prosecute kidnappings. In my town, you can kidnap all you want. It's fine. Basically, that's criminal, and that's like the good old days in Chicago.
Yeah,
and
that's
so,
exactly.
And so I don't think that the judge is restricting a law. He's stopping a criminal enterprise from proceeding forward.
Well, what's interesting, he's actually called the Department of Justice's attorney to the floor, and she has to produce a memorandum explaining who told her to tell these stories in his court, in which, by the way, she could be sanctioned. In fact, the Department of Justice could be sanctioned for misleading the court with the idea that DAPA was not in operation, when in fact DAPA has been fully already implemented.
They were giving out work permits.
They're giving away their work permits. And they're not deporting.
Yeah, and they're lying to the judge.
What's another $5 million?
They're lying to the judge the whole time.
They're just